Morning.
Hello, Catch-Up Crew. How's it going today? Not like you're gonna answer me because you were just listening to a YouTube recording. It's being pretty quiet today, so I'm just gonna start. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. February, Chapter 8, Retribution and Forgiveness. Orders for Gorhambury were usually delivered by an underling, in the form of notes written by the mayor's ferocious secretary, whose style was quite as peremptory as Mr. Starkle's. Last month's tax revenue. S's desk. Now. Or. Mayor's rickshaw. Scratched paint. Deal. The habitual exclamation mark was present in today's injunction. S's office. 10 a.m. sharp. The secretary, her hair wrenched back with combs, her painted eyebrows dark and pencil thin, gave a curt nod of approval as Gorhambury arrived on time. She stood up, smoothed her skirt over her knees, and opened the door. Something was horribly wrong. He had not been kept waiting. Snorkel's massive partner's desk sat in the middle of a powder blue carpet like a ship at sea. He flourished a bank statement, Gorhambury's own personal account, with a credit for 3 guineas highlighted in pink ink. Well? Gorhambury peered at the entry, too bewildered to protest at this invasion of privacy. 01426, 3 guineas credit. I've no idea. I never accept money from strangers. Gorhambury might have added that he was never offered money by strangers. He and Marmion Finch were the town's incorruptibles. Don't lie to me, Gorhambury. Snorkel suddenly exploded in self-righteous indignation. You've a pension, a bicycle tire allowance, and an indecently generous overtime rate. How dare you sink so low? Gorhambury suppressed the observation that his overtime rate worked out at less than his ordinary rate as his encyclopedic memory tripped into action. The transfer matched the date of his meeting with... Mrs. Banter ring a bell? Added Snorkel with perfect timing. Like many corrupt men, a remorseless cross-examiner when pursuing the faintest whiff of corruption in others. I did her a favor. I got her an invitation. Oh, really? To what? You've never given a party in your life. There was a clerical mix-up. She felt horribly left out, you see, and I felt sorry for her. You refer to the manor? Yes, but I was going anyway, and issuing invitations to other people's parties, that's positively regal. She lives alone. It seemed kind. Money is the evil of our time. It's a straight red, Gorhambury. Get your things and get out. I've done 18 years, 3 months, and 22 days of loyal service. Surely you mean a warning, protested Gorhambury. To be reduced to writing under the employment regulations? Red, red, red! Gorhambury slunk back to his desk, from which all municipal property had already been removed. Somewhere in that trampled soul, rebellion whispered. A year or so earlier, following a security failure, he had been given a spare set of keys to the main municipal buildings, as the man least likely to lose them. They were still there, in a polythene bag taped to the underside of his desk. He pocketed them, together with a large leather notebook and a box of pencils from the mayoral stationery cupboard. In lieu of notice, he said to himself. As he tramped home, he agonized over how he would pay the next month's rent. Mrs. Banter, too, received a follow-up dismissal after her ejection from Sir Veronal's party, the letter terse to the point of brutality and no less wounding. Dear Mrs. Banter, gatecrashers are not welcome in the mayoral suite. Be so kind as to treat any current invitations in your diary as withdrawn, and expect no more in the foreseeable future. A rubber stamp had appended a facsimile of Snorkel's signature. She detected the long hand of Sir Veronal Slickstone in this further humiliation. Her emotions swung from one extreme to another, from hatred of the interloper and an urge for revenge to a burning desire for reconciliation and a relaunch into society. After hours of agonizing reflection, she found a way to accommodate these contrasting ambitions. She had one point of leverage. The next morning she delivered a note to the manor, inviting Lady Slickstone to tea. The luck fell to Valorhand. When Sir Veronal contacted the mayor at dawn demanding action, he insisted on clemency for the night's worst offender. A reprimand would do. Snorkel, smarting from the label Snorky Porky, which he feared might stick, argued for instant dismissal, to no avail. Rhombus Smith delivered the reprimand in the manner of a complimentary rebuke. In his eyes, she had enlivened the evening. He liked it when fact outcolored fiction. I'm going to run quickly to charge my phone because it beeped at me, and that's where my internet is. Phone saved. Chapter 9, A Starry Night. The following evening, true to his word, Vesey Bolitho stood in the entry porch of the South Tower and welcomed Oblong with a cocktail. The first gulp almost laid the historian out. Mar's mistake, said Bolitho. Mixology is an art form. You wouldn't keep to the path in a beautiful park, so don't be a slave to the recipe book. Try the Bolitho's Beginner Guide. Pour in an inch of anything with a kick, add one enhancer as the mood takes, splash something pale into something colorful, or vice versa, and add that too. Discard any undrinkable outcome. Then serve the survivors with a celestial name appropriate to final impression. Ice is optional, as in the planetary system. This has chili sauce for the shy ones. From the hallway they climbed to the observatory, Bolitho pausing for breath on every landing. The walls were circular, the ceiling domed, the telescope resting on a raised dais. The aperture onto the sky was closed. A sea of paper obscured the floor. Bolitho apparently dismissed tables and chairs as spatially inefficient. The room was almost dark. With the flick of a switch, a skin and petal-shaped segment rose from the rim of the room towards the ceiling. A low, eerie blue light descended. Nightfall. How does the school afford equipment like this? A goodly fraction of the world's inventions come from the two towers of Rotherweird School and the workbenches of the apothecaries. Others claim the credit while we take our cut. You should see the science labs. Near the telescope stood a table crammed with glass discs, grinding wheels and metal scoops filled with colored powders. Rock dust, explained Bolitho. Up there swim the deeps, and these are my fishing rods. However, that's not why you're here. Bolitho brandished a remote control like a wand. On the fourth day of creation, as Bolitho spoke, the Almighty's work, suns, planets, moons, nebulae, appeared on the roof of the observatory. With a laser pen, the astronomer embarked on a tour of this two-dimensional cosmos. He awarded some only a name, others earned an explanation or anecdote. The horse head of nebula in Orion was the creation of dust. Mizar in Ursa Major should be renamed the Drunkard Star, being an optical double to the sober, 1 or 3 to the overindulged. It was a bravura performance. By the end, Oblong felt infinitesimally small, but this was only the introduction. Bolitho made an expansive gesture. Above you spreads the unique celestial geometry of a particular night in England 4.5 centuries ago, 1546 to be exact. Astrologers focus on the moment of birth, but it's the moment of conception that fixes our talents. All those stars have their gravitational pull on those minuscule lines of DNA as they mix and match. This rare alignment of the heavens brought the most particular gifts and defects into the world. He flicked another switch and the sky vanished. Ordinary lights came up and the skin retracted back into the rim of the dome. Bolitho suddenly looked frail and said as much. A star near the end of its existence we call an evolved star. Yes, I am unwell, Jonah. I may not be around much longer. I wanted to give you a glimpse of Rotherweird's origins, as our only historian. He turned off the lights. Back in his lodgings, Oblong reflected on his unexpected astronomy lesson. He checked the birth dates of his class, but they were scattered as he would have expected. Then he remembered that Bolitho had talked of Rotherweird centuries ago, and a generation of prodigies connected with her past. The town's extraordinary concentration of scientific talent had to have a rational cause, and an exceptional gene pool from long ago made sense, but why here? And why had they been brought together? An exceptional teacher might be an answer, but that explanation raised questions about the original owner of the manor and why the town's main building had been closed off for centuries. Oblong felt as if he had the outlying jigsaw pieces only. They provided the background, but left the main story obscure. Old history. 1561, the Rotherweird Valley. Dusk, early autumn. You can tell from the colors. Master Malise, older now, cheeks lightly stubbled, dark hair covering his arms, has ventured beyond the island field in breach of Sir Henry's instructions. He is pursuing the study of toxins, another breach of the rules. Here, on the margin between woodland and meadow, grows Amanita virosa, the destroying angel, which he prefers to Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric, another deadly mushroom found nearby. The agaric is too showy, its bright red-orange cap declaring its danger. This mushroom is all innocence on the outside, all white cap, white gills, white stalk, dressed like a saint. He has already force-fed a paste to mice and studied the convulsions and organ damage that followed. He hears someone nearby, and then that voice. Not that clump, Calx, they're spent. Go to the left. A pause. Ah, a boy is watching us. If he has manners, he will show himself. So Geryon Winter introduces himself and that famous sixth sense he so likes to display. It's one of the Wonder Children, if I'm not mistaken. The voice is sibilant, yet penetrating in its unforced quietness. They make an incongruous couple. Winter, lean of body and aquiline of face, and the corpulent servant. The servant bustles about as Winter stands motionless, save for the coal black eyes, which dart from boy to servant to mushrooms to possible paths. A quicksilver mind. Malise has never felt dominated before. He half resents it, half welcomes it. More names are exchanged. He wonders about our baskets. Winter, the mind reader. Calxbol, the servant, holds several wicker baskets. From inside them, Malise can hear scratching and fluttering. He is, indeed, curious. Shall we tell him? Shall we show him? Such an interest in mushrooms deserves reward. No doubt Sir Henry is learned on propagation and edible fruit, but I teach too. Your little white mushroom attacks the liver, which the ancients list with the brain and the heart as one of the three principal organs of the body. Who needs armies when you can strike down rulers with mushrooms? Now tell me, how are your class? Are all 10 of you alive and well? He is being toyed with. Malise is fascinated, drawn to Winter and his arcane knowledge, but repelled at the same time. He senses love can be like this. There are 2 peasant children also. 12 disciples, Calx, locked away in this valley with no possible future but arid, unapplied study. We could elevate them. We could show you a real future, Master Malise. Malise does not reply. He already knows he stands before Grassal's polar opposite. Of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Grassal knows only half. This man knows the tree through and through. Give him a pot, Calx. Ever wonder children must learn to fetch and carry? Malise is flattered by the invitation, but resentful of Winter's knowing assumption that he will comply. Winter moves for the first time, so light of step that he slithers rather than walks. On through the woods they go. Malise cannot imagine what the baskets are for, what destiny awaits the creatures inside. After some way, he is blindfolded. When the strip of cloth is removed, they are in a bowl beneath a ring of trees. A square white tablet is set in the ground. A pile of small cages stands nearby, which Winter leaves to Bowl to carry. Gateway, he says, gesturing to his servant, as if inviting a lady to lead off a dance. Bowl stands on the tile and disappears with the cages, and Malise follows without argument. A sense of dislocation is superseded by a strange new world. Bowl, a dagger suddenly in hand, crouches, so Malise follows suit. The grass feels alien. A bee with the carapace of a beetle scissors into the air, warbling like a bird. Winter arrives, and he too crouches before blowing on a wooden whistle. They wait, heads in the grass. Only the puffs of white cumulus could be called normal, but nothing prepares Malise for the creature that rises from 4 legs to 2 in front of him. Some ferox, says the creature. He sees the weasel in the man. Who could not? And understands the Latin, but something deeper stirs, a kinship. Malise, the precocious analyst, tries to articulate this attraction. He likes the predatory perfection, how the creature's constituent parts marry so exactly, and the way, despite the loping walk, he carries his makeshift spear with aplomb. I teach it English, says Winter. Let me help him, says Malise. Him, not it. Help, not teach. Ferox nods to himself. He prefers the boy's English. In return, he will teach the boy how to navigate the dangers of this place. Whether you do that depends on how your future plays out, says Winter before turning to Ferox. Labor omnia vincit. Ferox leads and Malise follows obediently in the tracks of the furry feet, Ferox parting the stalks with his spear. The strange fauna of this kingdom appear to respect the weasel man. Distorted creatures fly, burrow, scuttle away. Open the baskets, cries Winter. The great tree stands out, not just for its isolation and size, but for its falling leaves which flap and glide like bodiless bats, the seeds lined along the back like spinal vertebrae. The servant chooses a particular cage from the pile as Winter points to a shimmering patch of sky. No god, please note, Master Malise, just a physical phenomenon for use by any creature with the wit to understand it. Winter places 4 stones, each in a notch in a bar of the cage, only one to a side. An ancient art creaturing, the druids studied it. Caxball unloads 2 baskets, places a russet squirrel and a thrush in the cage and slides the bars across. Sometimes it reduces, sometimes it enlarges, but it always mixes. Into the shimmery patch of sky went the cage. Out came the cage. Winter hit the palm of one hand with the other fist as a misshapen mix of feather and fur, beak and mouth struggled to fly. He kicks it. Go on, Bull. The servant clumsily tries to kill the monstrosity as it lurches into the air only to plunge into the long grass. Winter laughs as Ferox moves with lolloping grace and strikes once. It is enough. Better, says Bull as Winter retrieves the stones. But not good enough. Winter turns to Malise. Experiment requires many hands. To note, to cage, to measure, to adjust. If in time we are to advance ourselves as well as the lower orders of life, we need assistants with sharp minds. Even Malise is shocked. You mean you'd put people in there, mix people with... Ferox looks sideways, oddly distracted as Winter continues regardless. With hope and time we will. Our slippery pocket of air does not distinguish, does she, Calx? She replicates. She does what she's told. But we are all different. Any worthwhile task has the spice of risk. Never fear, you'll soon discover a taste for it. After another failure, there is success. A small, hairless creature with splayed feet and tiny eyes that Winter calls a rat mole, despite the presence of stunted wings. Keep it, says Winter. They won't believe you otherwise. His words have layers of meaning. Persuade your fellow children. Choose my way, not Grassel's. Recruit. Feed it mice, worms, and small birds and make sure they're alive. Now, let me show you our best experiment. He raises a tiny box, a latticework prison with protruding blades of grass. In here we have our shortest-lived insect, the mayfly. After immersion in the mixing point, it still lives. How long, Bull? 69 days. Malise is quick. How old is Ferox? Past counting, replies the weasel man. He comes from an age of Latin, concludes Malise. They return to the white tile. Ferox stays here, Winter says. Malise and Ferox nod to each other. May he return, whispers Ferox in his new language, with a nod towards Malise. That is in his hands. He has much work to do. The basket judders as Malise carries his trophy home. How he would have their attention now. At first, all has gone well at Rotherweird Manor. The seers and the newcomers have discovered their identical ages and the closeness of their birthdays, all within weeks, most within days of each other, and their diverse gifts from mathematics to alchemy, anatomy to celestial studies. Hieronymus and his sister have introduced their new companions to the richness of the Rotherweird Valley. Only Malise has held aloof, a cruel boy, an experimenter with animals. Yet he has excelled at whatever subject Sir Henry chooses to teach, save for the more artistic. But over time, the seer's influence has waned as Malise has made his move for dominance. The girls have sided with him, jealous of Morval's beauty. He had discovered the locals' humble background, the children of swineherds. He calls them countrysiders. Only Throckmorton, an enthusiast for celestial theory, planets, and stars, has remained loyal to the seers. Yet so immersed are they in the natural world and its portrayal, visual and analytical, that they have taken little notice of their exclusion. Then Malise begins to disappear at night. He asks questions in class unrelated to their curriculum, about poisons, parasites, the study of political power. Then he releases his creature in the dormitory, his familiar, as he calls it. The seers sense its disfigured nature. Sir Henry notices the change and turns to his first charges for help. You'll not wish to talk to friends out of school, but sometimes the young must be saved from themselves. Malise went missing again last night. Do you know where he goes, whom he sees? He returns well cared for. I would send searchers, but we must preserve our secrecy here. We don't know how the new queen stands on the matter. Anything you can tell me? Sir Henry does not expect an answer. Informing would appear vengeful, but Sir Henry has overlooked a different force. The two orphans live by a fierce moral order with nature as its center. Malise has another teacher, says Hieronymus. An evil teacher, adds Morval. Why evil? He made Malise a pet, an unnatural creature, they add together. Who is this teacher? Karen or some such. Jerry and Winter, thinks Sir Henry. Why is Winter stalking my charges? Show me, he says, and they do when Malise is absent, not a rarity these days. Intermission for picture of the weird rat mole creature.
Cute.
The children advance in a line with sticks. Sir Henry fumbles for and finds the basket under Malise's cot in the great barn. He turns it out. The creature is not of this world. Bald with purple skin, lidless crimson eyes, stunted, half-developed leathery wings, ferocious claws and jagged teeth. Grassall goes for a net as the creature half flies, hissing and snapping, but they do not listen. They are seized by a mixture of fear and the excitement of the hunt. The abomination is beaten to death despite Sir Henry's calls for restraint. Only the seers and Throckmorton hang back. Malise has a gift for timing. He appears in the doorway as Sir Henry shakes the body from the net. He picks up his familiar, he cradles it and leaves, with a parting glance at Sir Henry of unadulterated hatred. Two months later, the Tower of Knowledge once more. Sir Henry has moved on to perspective and optical instruments. It is near midnight. Close to the Feast of the Nativity, the golden door is open to the sky's most wondrous gift, the winter constellations. And Sir Henry, face aglow in the candlelight, is speaking of reconciliation. Using a tube with proportional glasses, they come up, one by one, to observe the smudged outline of mountains on the face of a waning moon. I don't know how you came by this, or who fashioned it, but what a gift! Malise presents the object as a fawning tribute and apology for the monstrous creature. Bought from a merchant in Hoy, he says. Sir Henry holds up the lens with its bulbous, brassy body. We fix it here, and the old man bends to the telescope, pressing his right eye to the rim. There's a click, a whir, a terrible scream. He falls, hands streaming blood as Malise smiles. Arms and legs dance in shock as the poison works behind the eye. There is pandemonium. The seers try vainly to absorb the tainted blood with cloth. Others rush to Sir Henry's library, but they lack a starting point. A physician comes and offers comfort, but no cure. Malise and the eyepiece disappear. The old man's limbs begin to dance. His mouth leaks blood. He takes a day to die. Sir Henry, confident in his health for a few years yet and concerned not to jeopardize the progress of his charges until at least their majority, had postponed arrangements for his succession. Winter, primed by Malise as to the absence of any apparent heir or successor, appears at Grassal's funeral. He pays tribute and explains how at a lunch Grassal appointed him to be their teacher and life tenant of the manor after his death. Think of his age, says Winter. He had to make provision. He promises the children that Sir Henry intended for them unimaginable power, the chance to write their names in history. He does not linger. The next day he takes them to Lost Acre, and they stand in awe before Ferox and then the mixing point. The Weasel Man escorts them at noon, the safest time in this horribly dangerous place, on a path through the forest to a mere where fish break the surface and fly, snapping their jaws on insects as they pass. Why we keep to the plains, explains Winter, keen that his charges should understand the perils of the place. Malise skims flat stones along the surface of the water at the fish and strikes lucky. That evening there is no more mention of Sir Henry. They are 15 now, and it is time for change, Winter tells them. They will have a new name. They will have new names, a baptismal moment. His charges may choose one, and Bull will choose the other. Malise, ever searching for a drug that might induce truth-telling, chooses an unknown word, Veronal. Bull awards him Slickstone, superficially for his prowess with the skimming pebbles at the mere, but Winter suspects there is intended ambiguity, hard and polished, but somehow slippery too. One to watch, in other words. Only the seers decline to participate. Winter makes no move. These are Grassal's children in a way that the others are not. Their friend Throckmorton, the student of the heavens, is named Fortement by Bull. Again, a play of multiple meanings. A firm hand for the telescope, but perhaps a point or two to the boy's strength of character, a moral force who might yet cause trouble. That night they sit at a round table in the great hall. Winter has provided a feast. Brown trout from the river, venison from the woods, and plentiful mead. This is the beginning. His once extravagant ambition takes flight. He has 12 disciples, a route to immortality, and the chance to create the kind of monsters from which legends are made. Darker chapters lie ahead, for horror is part of the divine fabric. Gods in their stories are not knitted fireside toys. By flickering candles, he christens himself and his new recruits, the Eleusinians. In London, he has noted the coats of arms that decorate the banners, carriages, and fireplaces of the rich and powerful. Now you have names, and soon, if you work hard enough, you will be the first in the history of man to have living coats of arms. Morval Seer will record them. After Lost Acre, not one of them doubts that if they comply, this outlandish prophecy will come to pass. The scene will come to Sir Veronal as another bubble of memory slips. Ooh, nope, read it wrong. Rewind. The scene will come to Sir Veronal as another bubble of memory slips through the tiny hole in the ruptured membrane of his temporal cortex and unloads its cargo of sound and image. Night after night, the bubbles come and break, filling in the details of his lost youth, chapter by chapter. March. Chapter 1 of Pupils and Paddles. On the first Monday of March, with little left of term, Rodney took his place in Form 4. To Oblong's mild surprise, he proved the perfect pupil on his opening day, speaking only when spoken to and resisting any urge to exploit his father's celebrity. The show of respect proved to be only an overture. The Rotherweird academic day ended with 5 minutes in the form master's company. Rodney waited for his classmates to disperse. Sir? Slickstone. I love my history, sir. That's good to hear. We're both outsiders, right? But outsiders in Rotherweird, replied Oblong. Father requires you to teach me local history. How the town was built, when, by whom, why. I mean, good historians like you are inquisitive, aren't they? Oblong noted the familiar slippage from sycophancy to insolence and back, as first experienced at Sir Veronal's party. Yes, but when in Rome? Just what Sir V said you'd say. They learn our history, we should learn theirs. Sir V had become Rodney's preferred form of address and references to his putative father. Sir Veronal had never objected. After 1800 elsewhere, Rodney, but here never. Rules are rules. Sir V said you'd say that too. Remember, sir, he pays private rates for private lessons. Rodney offered the bribe with a telltale wink. I'm sorry to disappoint. Look, if the town bothers you, we'll explore the countryside, Saxons, Druids. I'm sorry, Slickstone. It's more than my job's worth. The boy turned on his heels and marched out, leaving Oblong ill at ease. The history regulations, once means to the political end of preserving Rotherweird's independence, had probably lost their usefulness long ago. He found himself sympathizing with Sir Veronal's stance. At the school gates, Rumba Smith accosted him. Remember your reports, Oblong. Make them prompt and pithy. Pithy? Pithy. Pithy. Pick a pronunciation. Headmaster, would the history regulations allow a little exploration of our rural sites? Burial mounds, forts, stone circles? The deeper you dig, the more you disturb, so in a word, no. Oblong debated these issues with himself so intensely that the headmaster's initial reminder only registered on his arrival at Artery Lane. Reports. Having never before lasted to the end of a term, he had overlooked the teacher's most basic chore. Ags arrived to replenish his cupboard with her homemade jam. You ain't writing their life histories, you know, said Ags, peering over his shoulder. Much as I like Mr. Fangwin, I don't go for his one-word approach. And I don't go for your one-volume approach. Anyways, you ought to be out and about, getting fit. For what? The Great Equinox race, of course. Ah, said Oblong, who, despite his gangly shape, fancied himself over a middle distance. If it's 800 yards or so, I'm your man. Who's talking about running? Come on, Ags. Out with it. You're my general person. Avoid a single. They capsize unless you're an expert, which you ain't. You be a turner and a twister, old man Rother. I'm losing you. The pub is the place to find a partner. People always chop and change. It's about the weight. 2ers and 3ers need just the right. Blimey, Mr. Oblong, you never look, do you? Right now, through them trees. Through his study window and the sweeps of willow breaking leaf, he glimpsed what looked like a half-walnut shell, and then another, in which figures paddled and pulled for dear life. What are they, Ags? And you the historian. They're coracles, the finest of vessels, to them what understand them. Willow and hide. They looked impossible to control. Oblong's swimming stroke had once been charitably described as puppy paddle. As for rowing, his legs were too long and his right arm stronger than his left. He shook his head with an apologetic smile. Ag smiled back. I'll send a costume round. I know just the thing. Costume? Ags had a look for closing a subject. She would jut her jaw and grimace while the right eyebrow rose very slowly. She did so now, and Oblong obligingly took the cue. Ags returned to the reports. Why do you think Mr. Fangwin kept them short? There's someone reads all the reports, ain't there? Like whom? Like his snorkel ship. The jaw jutted, the eyebrow rose like a tire inflating, the grimace came and went. When Ags left, Oblong remembered Fangwin's reference to Snorkel's ability to control. Getting to grips with the true pulse of Rotherweird was like peeling an onion, a process he recalled that usually ends in tears. He rewrote the reports, Fangwin style. An aggressive tuition program with the best teachers money could buy had hurried Rodney to competence in most subjects, and the lure of the Slickstone inheritance ensured dedication, but he still lagged far behind in Rotherweird's specialties, the sciences and mathematics. Briefed by Rhombus Smith, the teachers made allowances, but nonetheless resentment simmered in Rodney, especially in algebra classes where the cow-faced countrysider Gwen Ferdy, seated one desk to his left, fielded every question the rest could not answer with matchless speed and accuracy. The teacher, Miss Sine, a feisty middle-aged spinster, never put a question to Rodney. Is XY a monomial, Collier? Collier, the class's slowest intellect, gaped. Ferdy, it is correct. What happens if you multiply monomials? Rodney felt it time to make a mark. You get a polynomial, of course. Wrong. Ferdy? You get another monomial. Correct. Why do you always ask her? I thought algebra was about balancing things. Rodney's tone was surly, bordering on the aggressive. Sorry you're feeling out of it, Slickstone. Easily remedied. Is 2x plus 5 a monomial or a polynomial? It's 11 if x is 3. The class tittered. Sine did not make concessions in matters of discipline. We're not in the nursery now, Slickstone. Do the work to catch up. In the break, Gwen Ferdy for once miscalculated. She approached Rodney in the quad. All this must seem very strange. I can help you. Where I come from, you give me respect. Rodney jabbed her hard just below the throat to make a point. You countrysiders are the ones with learning to do. Ned Gully came to the rescue. Ease off, he said. The punch took Gully entirely by surprise, winding him. Slickstone strutted off to join Collier, a triumphant smirk on his face. Sir Veronal rebuked Rodney for such a crude display of aggression, promising a reckoning with the countrysiders when he took over governance of Rotherweird, but not before. Reluctantly, Rodney agreed to bide his time, but honor demanded revenge. Roy Rock, Aurelia's great-grandfather, had won the 1894 Great Equinox race single-handed. This year, she felt a whimsical urge to emulate him. Behind a jumble of boxes, crates, unsold items, and newspapers in the basement of Baubles and Relics, she found his coracle. It was a single, made of willow and tarred hide, as all Rotherweird coracles had to be. The skin remained sound, and so were the paddle and pole. In keeping with her life to date, she would be going it alone. She embarked on a haphazard program of training and physical exercise. Brave in the Spartan conditions of early spring, which turned more methodical as a mild flirtation with an idea became a dedicated goal. She watched others and proved a quick learner. To her surprise, her aunt agreed to her participation without a quibble. Since the party, she had been uncharacteristically subdued, forever muttering about its shameful conclusion. Aurelia could not square Mrs. Banter's intense distress in the alley on the night of the party, or this lingering malaise with their only apparent cause, Valorhand's ill-mannered performance. She judged it best to not delve deeper, and Mrs. Banter offered no detail. Valorhand did not do communal events, and even less so now. She had sought celebrity only to find herself cold-shouldered outside school society. She immersed herself in work and avoided Strimmer. Their fragile intimacy finally ended by her demonstration, a defiant rebuttal of Strimmer's desire for control. She knew that Gerhambry had been dismissed for a venal offence, and wondered why Sir Veronal had adopted such a forgiving approach to her. She looked to the lord of the manor for the next move. The lightning still nagged away at her. In her rooms she tried to construct lightning machines, but with little success. Every Rotherweird pupil knew how to generate sparks and static electricity with a balloon and a spoon, but a full-scale lightning bolt? She did not like or believe in insoluble problems. Oblong enjoyed a weekly drink at the Journeyman's Gist with Fangwin. On this particular evening, they were discussing possible subjects for the next term's history curriculum, when Fangwin polished his glasses, so heralding an announcement of moment. "I've reached a decision," he boomed, thumping the table. "This year, you, Jonah Oblong, are crewing my coracle." Half the pub heard the news as the rosy colour that goes with sturdy beer drained from Oblong's cheeks. "It'll be a riot. I've a new method. We can't have Strimmer winning a third time. Up Form 4. Strimmer? Cocky bastard. Fangwin lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. But they haven't reckoned with the Fangwin rotator. I'm useless in a boat. I go round in circles. You sit in the stern, admire my technique, and bail like a loony. Piece of cake. Bail? What else are buckets for? Just remember, the long scoop beats the quick dip every time. Fangwin's blue-grey eyes had the glint of a fanatic as he delivered a dramatic monologue on the great equinox race, its rules, the thrills and the spills, the dress code, only requirement, bizarre, and his own near misses with the winner's podium. Oblong felt a sense of impending doom, deepened by Ag's delivery of a grasshopper costume. Green tails, a green and yellow top hat complete with antennae, green and yellow striped trousers supported by black braces, and a pair of ancient plimsolls painted, no surprise here, green and yellow. Had Oblong been more observant, he would have been less astonished. Rotherweird's most outre clothes shop, Ragamuffin in Grove Lane, had for a month been plying a roaring trade in finished costumes for the well-off and in do-it-yourself components for the mean or impoverished, including feathers, ribbons, plastic wings, false noses and beaks, and foam rubber claws. Aurelia Rock invested in feathers and wings to mimic her namesake. Strimmer declined to expand his wardrobe, settling for the guise of a wasp, as in his winning performance of the previous year. Gregorius Jones entrusted his costume to his class. He found their choice pleasingly exotic, and the fashionistas of Form 6B did not disappoint in its execution. He would be hard to miss from the towpath. Miss Trimble's Viking dress, based on a Victorian novel from Baubles and Relics, boasted a horned helmet and silver lame chainmail. Oblong agreed to meet Fangwin and the journeyman's gist for a final briefing on strategy. The pub heaved with patrons discussing how the Rother would behave this year, whether better to draw the western or eastern circuit, the betting, new technology, and inevitably the weather. Oblong found 2 stools in the garden and waited. To his dismay, Strimmer arrived first. "Stool," barked Strimmer, pointing at the spare seat. "I'm keeping it for a friend." "I don't care who you're keeping it for. I'm here and he's not. And I'm from this town and you're an outsider." Fangwin arrived in the nick of time. "Ah, Strimmer, having a history lesson? Or is it manners?" "He's hogging the seats." "Not anymore." Fangwin placed his ample behind on the stool. "I hear you two are in the same boat," smirked Strimmer. "Up the creek without a paddle." "Youth and beauty," said Fangwin pleasantly. "You're all wind and no trousers," said Strimmer, "and your crew looks ready to wet himself." He guffawed at his own joke before moving to the bar. "Right, strategy lesson." The crazed glint had returned. Fangwin took out the chart. "Here's the start. At dawn." He pointed north of the town. "Every entrant draws east or west, and has to follow his drawn direction when the river divides. The finish is here. He pointed 200 yards below the southern bridge. But here's a catch. Rotherweird has a bore, and I don't mean Grahambury. It's an underground tidal freak that delivers a surge, always at dawn at the spring equinox. It can knock out half the field. That's where craftsmanship comes in. Don't we practice? Fangwin slumped in mock outrage. Practice? We're amateurs, Oblong. Olympians, the last of a dying breed. Now attend to your skippers. Poles propel, but also attack. They have squidgy balls on the end. Oblong had an instant vision of Strimmer tilting him overboard. Cheer up. You try pulling people in a coracle, fraught with peril. Now, look at this. Fangwin's voice sunk to a conspiratorial whisper as he flourished a piece of paper crisscrossed with sums, formulae, and diagrams. The Fangwin rotator. Spin like a beetle, sting like a bee. He downed his pint of sturdy before adding, Uniform. I trust you have suitably exotic plumage. Idiotic. That's the spirit, said Fangwin, heading off for his early bed. Jovial banter with the landlord was standard fare at the journeyman's gist, so customers assumed there must be good cause for Billsferdy's silence over the last 2 weeks and respected it. Ferdy had placed the town's hall letter under the lip of the bar in the hope it would disappear. Tonight, on the eve of one of the pub's busiest days, the aftermath of the great equinox race, the notice period expired, and Slickstone had retaliated with perfect timing. With an hour to closing time, Bill Ferdy rang the old sailor's bell with which he had called time for decades, and announced that drinks were on the house. The more sensitive present detected a troubling air of finality in the gesture. And that is it for tonight.
No!
Well, yes, we already know that he got a letter, if you remember or rewatched parts 1, 2, and 3.
I remember losing the plot.
Yeah, he got a letter saying that you must leave your pub by this date. So
Yeah. No, I meant know about stopping Ricky.
Well, it's been an hour, and that's how much I can read in one day.
Back when I was about 14, I learned to make
Cool.
there was a local centre called the Green. They did pole laving and coracle.
Cool. Very cool. I am getting oddly sleepy. And just about getting the yawns.
I said you are looking sleepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if it's a combo of reading out loud and beer.
You didn't try the cocktail advice.
Not tonight, no, but I might some other time. So, shall we say goodbye to Catch Up Crew?
Indeed, we should.
Before I fall asleep.
There is a tradition of people falling asleep, but not normally the storyteller.
All right. Catch Up Crew. Remember, there's one very cool recipe for cocktails in this episode that if we ever finish this book, should probably follow it for the closing night. Any other advice, Duncan? Anything interesting you might want to share?
When you're in a coracle, don't stand up.
But story time is stopping tonight, so good night, everyone.